When I was called to the chief physician's office and saw those fake messages claiming I was having a forbidden affair with Dr. Ethan, I didn't laugh. I didn't cry either. I just waited. Because the doctor's jealous wife, Lydia, thought she walked into that room holding my termination papers. She was so sure she had destroyed me that, drunk on victory, she even winked at me. But there was a tiny detail Lydia had forgotten. She hadn't accounted for the woman sitting quietly in the darkest corner of the room with her laptop, Kendra. 1 hour later, when she walked out of that door, not only were Lydia's lies destroyed, but her life had come crashing down around her. When you hear what actually happened in that room, you will get goosebumps. Before we start the story, if you love seeing justice served, please subscribe to the channel and like the video. Now, buckle up. Here we go. My name is Brooklyn. I am a calm, career-focused nurse working in the internal medicine department of a major hospital in Seattle. My life consists of shifts, patient rounds, and coffee breaks. I don't like drama, and I hate gossip. Working with Dr. Ethan Walker has always been easy. He is professional, respectful, and an excellent physician. Not a single word has ever passed between us other than professional teamwork, but his wife... Oh, Lydia. Lydia was a paranoid, controlling, and dangerously jealous woman who suspected Ethan every time he even breathed. I can still see the way she looked at me every time she came to the hospital, staring as if I were a criminal. But the final straw came on that cursed Tuesday. The hospital's human resources manager called me urgently. When I entered the office, a thick file was sitting on the desk. On the cover, in large letters, it read, "Ethical violation and misconduct." My blood ran cold as I turned the pages. Lydia had prepared hundreds of fake WhatsApp messages that looked like they were written by me, photoshopped pictures of us together, and even AI-generated recordings mimicking my voice. According to the file, I was a homewrecker trying to steal Ethan from his family. Lydia had gone so far that she wanted me banned from the profession. The disciplinary hearing was set for that afternoon. Ethan was devastated, ashamed of his wife's madness, but his hands were tied. Lydia was shouting threats like, "If you prove me wrong, I will expose this hospital to the press. I will sue all of you." It is 3 p.m. We are in the meeting room. I am at one end of the table, and Lydia is at the other, sitting like a victorious commander. The hospital administration is tense. Lydia started shouting, waving the fake printouts in her hand. "Here is the proof. This woman is harassing my husband. Look at the messages sent from this number. Look at the timestamps. Look at what she wrote to him while my husband was on the night shift." I remained silent. I could only say, "None of this is true. I don't even know that number." But Lydia was very prepared. The fake screenshots were so professional that even the board members had started to look at me with suspicion. I felt like my career was over. My eyes filled with tears, and my hands started to tremble. Just then, in the corner of the room, the woman who hadn't said a single word since the meeting began, almost invisible in her black hoodie and with her gray laptop, cleared her throat. Kendra. Kendra was the cybersecurity and digital forensics expert the hospital had recently hired. The hospital had called her in at the last minute to verify the digital evidence Lydia had presented. Lydia looked at her with disdain and asked, "Who are you? A secretary or something?" Kendra adjusted her glasses and spoke in that calm voice that froze the room. "No, Mrs. Walker, I am the person mapping your digital footprints." Lydia's smile faded slightly, but she was still relaxed. Kendra stood up and connected her laptop to the projector. A giant code scheme and map appeared on the screen. "Mrs. Lydia, I examined the IP addresses from which the messages in these screenshots were sent," Kendra said. Lydia panicked. "What IP address?" "They're screenshots." Kendra smiled coldly and continued without breaking eye contact with Lydia. "Yes, they are screenshots, but every digital communication leaves a trace, Mrs. Walker, even if you delete it, even if you think you've hidden it. Every message, every photo, every timestamp carries metadata, and this metadata tells me exactly where, when, and from which device it was created. The room fell silent. Lydia's face began to lose color, but she tried to maintain her composure. She crossed her arms defensively and said, "I don't understand what you're talking about. These messages came from that woman's phone. I'm just showing the truth." Kendra nodded slowly, as if she had expected this answer. "All right, let's test that theory then." She clicked on her laptop and a detailed table appeared on the screen. This is Brooklyn's phone data for the last 6 months, provided by her mobile carrier with her written consent. Call logs, message logs, data usage, everything. She turned to me and asked, "Brooklyn, may I share your phone's IMEI number?" I nodded immediately. Of course, I have nothing to hide. Kendra displayed my phone's unique identification number on the screen. Now let's look at the messages in Lydia's file. According to these screenshots, Brooklyn allegedly sent romantic and inappropriate messages to Dr. Ethan between 11:47 p.m. on March 15th and 2:33 a.m. on March 16th. She zoomed in on one of the fake screenshots. But there's a problem. Brooklyn's phone records show that at exactly 11:47 p.m. on March 15th, her device was connected to the hospital's internal Wi-Fi system on the 4th floor, which is the intensive care unit where she was working her night shift. Hospital security cameras confirm she never left that floor until 6 a.m. Lydia shifted uncomfortably in her seat. So what? She could have sent the messages from there. Kendra shook her head. No, she couldn't have, because the phone number shown in your screenshots, the one you claim belongs to Brooklyn, has never been registered to her name. In fact, that number doesn't exist in any telecommunications database in the United States. It's a fabricated number, Mrs. Walker, a ghost number created specifically for these fake screenshots. The chief physician leaned forward with narrowed eyes. Are you saying these messages were never sent at all? Exactly, Kendra confirmed. These screenshots were created using widely available fake chat generator applications. I found the exact template used to create them. It's a website called fakewhatsapp.net, and it logs the IP addresses of its users. She clicked again, and a map of Seattle appeared on the screen with a red dot pulsing in one specific neighborhood. On March 14th at 9:23 p.m., someone accessed this website from this IP address and spent 47 minutes creating fake conversation threads. That IP address belongs to the residential internet connection at 2847 Pinehurst Avenue, which, according to public records, is your home address, Mrs. Walker. Lydia's eyes went wide and she jumped to her feet. That's impossible. Someone must have hacked my internet. This is absurd. Kendra remained completely calm. I considered that possibility, which is why I also examined the device fingerprints. The computer used to create these fake messages has a unique browser configuration, specific installed fonts, a particular screen resolution, and a distinct pattern of cached data. She brought up another screen showing technical details. This device has been used to log into your personal Facebook account, your Instagram account, your online shopping accounts, and your email, all within the same time period. Unless you're claiming someone broke into your house, used your computer, knew all your passwords, created fake evidence against Brooklyn, and then left without a trace, the only logical conclusion is that you created these screenshots yourself. The room erupted. The hospital's legal advisor started taking frantic notes. The chief physician's face turned red with anger. Dr. Ethan put his head in his hands, unable to even look at his wife. But Lydia wasn't done fighting. She pointed a shaking finger at Kendra and screamed, "You're lying! You're in on this! Brooklyn probably paid you to fabricate this so-called evidence." Kendra tilted her head slightly as if considering a child's tantrum. "Mrs. Walker, I was hired by the hospital 3 weeks ago through a competitive bidding process. I had never heard of Brooklyn Hale until yesterday when I was asked to examine this case. I have no personal connection to her, no financial incentive to lie, and frankly, no reason to risk my professional reputation. However, you do have a motive. You have a documented history of jealous behavior, according to statements we've collected from hospital staff, and now we have concrete evidence that you fabricated this entire accusation. Lydia's lawyer, who had been sitting quietly next to her, suddenly spoke up. "Mrs. Walker, I strongly advise you to stop talking immediately." But Lydia was beyond reason. She turned to her husband with tears streaming down her face. "Ethan, tell them. Tell them about all the times you came home late. Tell them about the perfume I smelled on your clothes. Tell them why you're always texting someone." Dr. Ethan finally looked up, his face a mixture of exhaustion and sadness. "Lydia, I have never cheated on you. The late nights were because we're understaffed at the hospital. The perfume you smelled was probably from patients or their families who hug us when we deliver good news. And the texting? I was communicating with my colleagues about patient care, which you would know if you had ever actually looked at my phone instead of just accusing me." Kendra cleared her throat to regain control of the room. "There's more." She clicked to a new slide showing audio waveforms. Mrs. Walker also submitted 3 audio recordings claiming to have captured inappropriate conversations between Brooklyn and Dr. Walker. However, spectral analysis reveals these recordings were created using voice synthesis software. The background noise patterns don't match any location in this hospital. The acoustic signatures are artificially generated, and most damning, the voice attributed to Brooklyn has frequency characteristics that don't match her actual voice print. She played one of the fake recordings and then played a real recording of my voice from a hospital training video side by side. Even to the untrained ear, the difference was obvious. The fake version sounded slightly robotic with unnatural pauses. "How did you even get samples of my voice to create these?" I asked, horrified. Kendra answered before Lydia could. "Hospital training videos are posted on the internal website. Your voice appears in several of them discussing patient care protocols. Mrs. Walker accessed those videos 17 times in the week before she filed this complaint. She downloaded them and used basic AI voice cloning software to generate new sentences you never actually said." The hospital administrator stood up, his face grave. "Mrs. Walker, do you understand the severity of what you've done? You have attempted to destroy an innocent woman's career and reputation with fabricated evidence. You have wasted hospital resources and staff time. You have committed defamation and potentially several criminal offenses." Lydia collapsed back into her chair, her face now completely drained of color. Her moment of victory had turned into her worst nightmare. But Kendra still wasn't finished. Page 3. "There's something else the board needs to know," Kendra said, her tone growing even more serious. "While investigating Mrs. Walker's digital activities, I discovered she didn't stop at creating fake evidence against Brooklyn. She also attempted to hack into Dr. Walker's hospital email account multiple times over the past 2 months using password cracking software. She failed because our system has multi-factor authentication, but the attempts were logged. Additionally, she created a fake email address designed to look like it belonged to Brooklyn, using a slightly altered spelling, and sent messages to several of Dr. Walker's colleagues suggesting that Brooklyn was spreading rumors about staff members and engaging in unprofessional conduct. I felt my stomach drop. She had been building this campaign against me for months, methodically trying to destroy my reputation from multiple angles. This wasn't just jealousy. This was calculated psychological warfare. How many people had received those emails? How many colleagues had been viewing me with suspicion because of lies I didn't even know existed? Kendra pulled up email headers on the screen. These emails were sent from a coffee shop near Mrs. Walker's home, but again, the device fingerprints match her laptop. She was careful not to send them from her home IP address, showing premeditation and awareness that what she was doing was wrong. The coffee shop's security camera footage, which I obtained with a warrant this morning, shows Mrs. Walker sitting alone with her laptop at the exact times these emails were sent. Lydia's lawyer stood up abruptly. "This meeting is over. My client will not be answering any more questions without further legal consultation. Mrs. Walker, we're leaving now." But the chief physician raised his hand. Sit down, both of you. We're not finished. He turned to the hospital's legal advisor. What are our options here? The legal advisor flipped through her notes with a grim expression. The hospital has grounds to pursue legal action against Mrs. Walker for defamation, harassment, attempted unauthorized access to hospital systems, and filing a false complaint. Brooklyn also has personal grounds for a civil lawsuit. Additionally, depending on how the district attorney views this evidence, there could be criminal charges including identity theft, forgery, and filing a false police report if Mrs. Walker made any official statements to law enforcement. I actually filed a police report last week, Lydia said suddenly, her voice small and defeated. I told them Brooklyn was stalking Ethan and threatening our family. I gave them copies of all these documents. The room fell into stunned silence. Kendra closed her eyes briefly and shook her head. That elevates this to a criminal matter. Filing a false police report is a misdemeanor in Washington state, but when combined with the fabricated evidence and the harm intended, the prosecutor might pursue felony charges. Dr. Ethan finally spoke, his voice breaking. Lydia, why? Why would you do this? We've been married for 8 years. I've never given you any reason not to trust me. I've been patient with your jealousy. I've tried therapy with you. I've changed my schedule to spend more time at home, and still, it's never enough. Now you've destroyed an innocent person's life and our marriage in one move. What did you think would happen here today? Lydia looked at her husband with tears streaming down her face, but said nothing. The silence stretched out painfully until Kendra spoke again. If I may, there's a psychological component here that the board should understand. Mrs. Walker's pattern of behavior suggests a condition called Othello syndrome, or morbid jealousy. It's a psychiatric disorder where a person is convinced their partner is being unfaithful despite a lack of evidence. Sufferers often create or distort evidence to match their delusions. This doesn't excuse Mrs. Walker's actions, but it might explain them. She may need psychiatric treatment rather than just legal consequences. The chief physician nodded slowly. That will be for the courts and medical professionals to determine. Right now, we need to address the immediate situation. Brooklyn, on behalf of this hospital, I offer you our sincerest apologies. You have been subjected to a horrific ordeal based on completely fabricated accusations. Your record will be cleared completely, and we will provide a written statement to that effect. Additionally, the hospital will cover any legal expenses you incur in pursuing civil action against Mrs. Walker, and we will fully cooperate with any criminal investigation. We will also be conducting an internal review to determine how this complaint was initially processed and whether our procedures need improvement to prevent false accusations from advancing this far in the future. I felt tears of relief rolling down my cheeks, but I quickly wiped them away. Thank you. I just want my reputation restored, and I want to make sure this never happens to anyone else. The chief physician turned to Lydia with cold fury in his eyes. Mrs. Walker, you are banned from this hospital property effective immediately. Security will escort you out. Your husband's employment is not affected by your actions. But if you attempt to contact Brooklyn, any hospital staff member, or interfere with Dr. Walker's work in any way, we will seek a restraining order. Do you understand? Lydia nodded mutely. All her earlier confidence completely evaporated. Her lawyer helped her stand and they moved toward the door, but Kendra called out one more time, Mrs. Walker, one more thing. The forensic report I've prepared will be shared with law enforcement as required by law. I recommend you speak with a criminal defense attorney immediately because the evidence against you is overwhelming and undeniable. There are no ambiguities here, no room for alternative interpretations. You created false evidence with the intention of destroying someone's career and freedom, and every step of that process is documented. As Lydia walked out of the room, her face was no longer flushed with victory, but pale with the realization of what she had done and what was coming for her. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like a judge's gavel. Dr. Ethan approached me with his head bowed. Brooklyn, I don't even know what to say. I'm so sorry. I should have seen how bad her condition had become. I should have protected you from this. I took a deep breath and looked at him with compassion despite everything. Ethan, this isn't your fault. You can't control another person's mental illness or their choices. I hope you get her the help she needs, but I also hope you take care of yourself. This can't have been easy for you either. He nodded gratefully and left the room, looking like a man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. After everyone else filed out, only Kendra and I remained. I turned to her with overwhelming gratitude. You saved my life today. If you hadn't been here with your expertise and your thoroughness, I would have lost everything based on lies. Kendra packed up her laptop and gave me a small smile. I was just doing my job, Brooklyn. The truth was always there in the data. I just had to extract it and present it clearly. But I'm glad I could help. False accusations are incredibly damaging, and I've seen too many cases where people are convicted in the court of public opinion before the facts are examined. Digital forensics gives us a way to cut through lies and find objective truth. How did you learn to do all this? I asked. The technical skills, the way you remained so calm under pressure, the way you systematically dismantled every false claim? She shrugged modestly. I have a master's degree in computer science and certifications in digital forensics and cybersecurity, but honestly, the calm demeanor comes from years of testifying in court cases where people's freedom hangs in the balance. If I can present evidence that helps a jury understand the truth in a murder trial, I can certainly handle a hospital disciplinary hearing. The stakes were high for you, but I've been trained for high-stakes situations. We exchanged contact information, and Kendra promised to send me copies of her full report for my records. As I walked out of that meeting room, I felt like I had been through a war, but emerged victorious. My phone buzzed with messages from colleagues who had already heard what happened, expressing their support and relief that the truth had come out. Over the next few days, the hospital moved swiftly to restore my reputation. An email was sent to all staff members explaining that I had been falsely accused and completely exonerated, and that Mrs. Lydia Walker was banned from the premises. The chief physician personally called several nursing supervisors to ensure the message was clear and that there would be no lingering whispers or doubts about my character. I was offered counseling services to help process the trauma of the accusation, and the hospital's public relations team prepared a statement in case the media picked up the story. Dr. Ethan took a leave of absence to deal with his personal situation. I heard, through the grapevine, that he had moved out of the house he shared with Lydia and was staying with his brother while he figured out his next steps. He had hired a divorce attorney and was cooperating fully with the police investigation into his wife's actions. Part of me felt terrible for him because despite everything, I could see he had genuinely loved Lydia and had tried to make their marriage work despite her increasingly irrational jealousy. But another part of me recognized that sometimes love isn't enough when mental illness and toxic behavior go untreated. Lydia's criminal case moved forward quickly. The prosecutor decided to charge her with filing a false police report, criminal defamation, identity theft for creating the fake phone number in my name, and attempted unauthorized computer access for trying to hack Ethan's email. Her attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, arguing that she was suffering from a mental health crisis and needed treatment rather than jail time. The prosecutor agreed to recommend probation and mandatory psychiatric treatment if she pleaded guilty to all charges and agreed to pay restitution to cover my legal fees and the hospital's costs for the investigation. Lydia accepted the plea deal. At her sentencing hearing, which I attended with Kendra by my side, she stood before the judge, looking nothing like the confident woman who had walked into that disciplinary meeting expecting my destruction. She was thin and pale, her hair pulled back severely, wearing a conservative gray suit that made her look even more washed out. When the judge asked if she had anything to say before sentencing, Lydia turned to face me directly. "Brooklyn, I know you have no reason to forgive me or even listen to me, but I need to say this anyway. I was wrong. I was sick, I am sick, and I let my illness hurt an innocent person. You didn't deserve any of what I put you through. I convinced myself that you were a threat to my marriage because it was easier than facing the truth that my marriage was failing because of my own behavior. I created an enemy where none existed because I needed someone to blame for my unhappiness. I'm not asking for your forgiveness because I don't deserve it, but I want you to know that I will spend the rest of my life trying to become a better person and making sure I never hurt anyone like this again. I didn't respond. I simply nodded to acknowledge her words, but I made no move to offer forgiveness or comfort. Some wounds are too deep for easy reconciliation, and I needed to protect my own healing process. The judge sentenced Lydia to 18 months of probation, 200 hours of community service, mandatory psychiatric treatment, including weekly therapy and medication management, a permanent restraining order preventing her from contacting me or coming within 500 feet of me, and restitution totaling $47,000 to cover my legal expenses, therapy costs, and the hospital's investigation fees. As we left the courthouse, Kendra and I stopped for coffee at a small cafe nearby. She had become a friend over the past few weeks, someone I trusted completely because she had proven her integrity and skill when it mattered most. "So what happens next for you?" she asked, sipping her latte. "Are you going to stay at the hospital or look for a fresh start somewhere else?" I thought about it for a moment, watching the rain streak down the cafe window. "I'm staying. If I leave now, it feels like she wins, like she succeeded in driving me away even though she didn't destroy my career. This is my hospital, these are my patients, and I'm good at what I do. I'm not going to let her madness take that away from me, but I am going to be more cautious about maintaining boundaries and documenting everything. This experience taught me that even when you've done nothing wrong, you can still be targeted by someone else's delusions." Kendra nodded approvingly. "That's a healthy perspective. And for what it's worth, I think you're incredibly strong. Most people would have crumbled under that kind of attack, but you held it together and trusted the process to reveal the truth. That takes courage." I smiled at her. "I held it together because you were there to find the truth. If it had just been my word against her fabricated evidence, I don't know if I would have been believed. You gave me something more powerful than my own testimony. You gave me undeniable proof." We finished our coffee and went our separate ways, but that wasn't the end of the story. About 2 months later, I received an unexpected email from Lydia's psychiatrist, Dr. Melissa Chen, asking if I would be willing to participate in a family therapy session as part of Lydia's treatment. The email was carefully worded, emphasizing that I was under no obligation to participate and that my well-being was the priority, but that hearing from me might help Lydia process her actions and take fuller responsibility for the harm she caused. I discussed it with my own therapist, who I had been seeing regularly since the accusation to work through the trauma and anxiety it had triggered. She helped me weigh the pros and cons. On one hand, I had no desire to spend time in a room with Lydia or to become part of her healing journey. On the other hand, my therapist pointed out that I might find closure in having the opportunity to speak my truth directly to Lydia in a controlled, therapeutic environment where I would be protected and supported. After much consideration, I agreed to one session with the understanding that if at any point I felt uncomfortable or re-traumatized, I could leave immediately and would not be pressured to continue. The session was scheduled for a Saturday morning at Dr. Chen's private practice, a comfortable office with soft lighting and strategically placed plants that created a calming atmosphere. When I arrived, Lydia was already there, sitting in one of the chairs arranged in a circle. She looked different, healthier somehow, like the weight of her secrets and lies had been lifted, even if it had been replaced by the weight of consequences. Dr. Chen greeted me warmly and explained the ground rules. Lydia would not be allowed to speak until I had said everything I wanted to say. I could express any emotions I felt without judgment. The goal was not reconciliation or forgiveness, but truth-telling and accountability. I sat down across from Lydia and took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. For a long moment, I just looked at her, this woman who had tried to destroy me, and I tried to find the words to express the full impact of what she had done. Lydia, when I received that call to come to the chief physician's office, my entire world stopped. In that moment, I went from being a respected professional to being accused of being a homewrecker and a liar. Do you have any idea what that feels like? To have your character attacked with lies so elaborate and convincing that even people who've worked with you for years start to doubt you? Lydia's eyes filled with tears, but she remained silent, following Dr. Chen's instructions to just listen. I continued, my voice growing stronger. I lost sleep. I had panic attacks. I questioned everything about myself, wondering if somehow I had unknowingly done something to make you think I was interested in your husband. I replayed every interaction I'd ever had with Ethan, searching for some innocent moment you might have misinterpreted, some smile or laugh that you twisted into evidence of betrayal. And the worst part was knowing that no matter what I said in my defense, you had created false evidence that looked so real that it might be believed over my word. I stood up and began pacing, the emotion rising in my chest. You didn't just attack me professionally, Lydia. You attacked my sense of safety in the world. You taught me that even when you live honestly and ethically, someone can still fabricate a completely false narrative about you and nearly destroy you with it. Do you know that I now screenshot every text conversation I have? That I keep detailed logs of where I am and what I'm doing, just in case someone decides to accuse me of something I didn't do again? You've made me paranoid and defensive in a way I never was before, and I hate that I had to change because of your lies. Lydia was openly crying now, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs, but I wasn't finished. And let's talk about the ripple effects. My parents were terrified that I was going to lose my nursing license. My younger sister, who looks up to me and wants to be a nurse too, had to hear her classmates gossiping about her sister, the alleged homewrecker, because somehow rumors spread faster than corrections. My best friend from nursing school called me in tears because she had heard the accusations and didn't know if she should believe them or defend me. You didn't just hurt me. You hurt everyone who cares about me by putting them through the nightmare of wondering if someone they loved had done something terrible, or worse, knowing I was innocent but watching helplessly as I was publicly accused. Dr. Chen gently placed a hand on my arm. "Brooklyn, you're doing beautifully. Take your time." I sat back down and looked directly into Lydia's eyes. But here's what I need you to understand most of all. Your jealousy was never about me. I was just a convenient target because I worked with your husband and you needed someone to blame for whatever was wrong in your marriage. If it hadn't been me, it would have been another nurse or a receptionist or a woman you saw him talking to in a grocery store. The problem was never that Ethan was unfaithful or that other women were threats. The problem was that you couldn't trust him and you couldn't face whatever fears and insecurities were driving your behavior. I leaned forward slightly. And because you couldn't face your own issues, you nearly ruined my life. You were willing to take away my career, my reputation, my sense of self-worth, all to prop up your delusion that if you could just eliminate me as a perceived threat, your marriage would be fine. But your marriage wasn't fine, and it wasn't my fault. The evidence Kendra found proved that. But even if there had been no digital forensics expert to catch you, the truth would still be the same. I never touched your husband, never flirted with him, never sent him a single inappropriate message, never even thought about him outside of work. You created an entire false reality and tried to make everyone else believe it was real. Lydia whispered, barely audible. I know all of that now. Can I speak?" She looked at Dr. Chen, who looked at me for permission. I nodded. Lydia took a shaky breath and said, "Brooklyn, you're right about everything. I was sick. I am still sick. But now I'm getting treatment and I understand what I did to you. The jealousy consumed me completely. Every time Ethan mentioned work, I imagined affairs. Every time he was late coming home, I invented scenarios. I stalked his social media. I checked his phone. I called the hospital pretending to be a patient just to hear if there were women's voices in the background. It was never-ending torture, but it was torture I was creating in my own mind. She wiped her tears with a tissue Dr. Chen handed her. When I saw your photo on the hospital website and read that you worked in Ethan's department, something in me snapped. You were young and pretty and accomplished, everything I felt I wasn't anymore, and I decided you must be the reason Ethan seemed distant. It was easier to create an enemy than to look at my own behavior and see how my constant accusations and suspicions were pushing him away. So I started planning how to get rid of you. I researched how to create fake screenshots. I practiced mimicking your voice. I built this elaborate case against you like a lawyer preparing for trial. And the sickest part is that while I was doing it, I actually believed it was justified. I convinced myself I was protecting my family from a real threat. Lydia looked down at her hands, her voice dropping even lower. But when Kendra started presenting her evidence, when I saw the IP addresses and the timestamps and the irrefutable proof that I had created everything, reality crashed down on me. In that moment, I realized I wasn't protecting my family. I was destroying it. I wasn't the hero of my own story. I was the villain in yours. And I had become exactly the kind of person I always feared. Someone who hurts innocent people because of her own issues. I listened without interrupting, and when she finished, I said, I appreciate you saying that, Lydia. I believe you're genuinely remorseful, and I can see you're getting help. But I need you to know that I'm not here to make you feel better about what you did. I'm here because my therapist thought it might help me to say these things directly to you, and it has. I feel lighter having told you exactly how you impacted my life. But forgiveness? That's not something I'm ready to offer, and I may never be ready. What you did was too calculated, too cruel, for me to just move past it because you're sorry now. Lydia nodded, more tears streaming down her face. I understand. I don't expect forgiveness, and I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I see the harm I caused, and I will carry that responsibility for the rest of my life. I'm going to complete my treatment, I'm going to pay every penny of restitution I owe you, and I'm going to dedicate myself to making sure I never hurt anyone like this again. Not for your benefit, but because it's the right thing to do, and because I need to become a person I can live with. Dr. Chen spoke up gently. Brooklyn, is there anything else you need to say or ask before we close this session? I thought for a moment, and then asked the question that had been bothering me since the disciplinary hearing. Lydia, when you were creating those fake messages and voice recordings, when you were spending hours building this case against me, did you ever stop and think about what would happen to me if your plan worked? Did you ever consider that I might lose my license, my livelihood, my reputation, everything I've worked for? Or was I so dehumanized in your mind that my suffering didn't matter? Lydia took a long time to answer, clearly struggling with the question. The honest answer is that I didn't think about you as a real person with a real life. In my mind, you were just an obstacle, a threat that needed to be removed. I know how horrible that sounds, and I'm ashamed to admit it, but it's the truth. I was so trapped in my delusion that I couldn't see you as anything other than the woman trying to steal my husband, even though that woman only existed in my imagination. It wasn't until I saw your face in that meeting, saw the real pain and fear in your eyes, that I started to understand you were a human being I was destroying. I stood up, feeling that I had said everything I needed to say. Thank you for being honest about that, Lydia. It confirms what I suspected, that I was never really a person to you, just a symbol of your fears. I hope your treatment helps you learn to see people as individuals rather than as characters in the stories your illness creates. I hope you get healthy, not for my sake, but for yours, and for anyone else who might cross your path in the future. But I also hope you understand that I need to move forward with my life without you in it. This is our closure, and after today, I don't want any further contact. Dr. Chen stood as well. Brooklyn, you've handled this with remarkable grace and maturity. Lydia, this was an important step in your treatment, hearing directly from Brooklyn about the impact of your actions. We'll process this in our individual sessions going forward. Thank you both for participating in this difficult conversation. I shook Dr. Chen's hand, nodded briefly to Lydia, and walked out of that office feeling genuinely lighter. I had confronted my accuser, I had spoken my truth, and I had maintained my boundaries. It wasn't about forgiveness or reconciliation. It was about reclaiming my power and refusing to be defined by what had been done to me. Life slowly returned to normal at the hospital. Dr. Ethan eventually came back from his leave of absence, and we worked together professionally as we always had, though there was an unspoken understanding that we would maintain even stricter boundaries than before. He never brought up his personal life, and I never asked. His divorce from Lydia was finalized about 6 months after the disciplinary hearing, and I heard he started dating someone new about a year later. I genuinely hoped he had learned from the experience and chosen a partner who was emotionally healthy. Kendra and I became close friends. She invited me to join a support group she facilitated for people who had been victims of false accusations or cyber harassment, and I found tremendous healing in connecting with others who understood what I had been through. Some of them had lost jobs, relationships, or opportunities because of lies spread about them, and hearing their stories reminded me how lucky I was that the truth had been discovered before permanent damage was done to my career. About a year after the incident, I was asked to speak at a nursing conference about professional boundaries and protecting yourself from false accusations. I was nervous about sharing my story publicly, but I felt it was important for other healthcare workers to understand that these situations can happen to anyone and to know how to document their professional interactions and respond if they find themselves falsely accused. Standing at that podium looking out at hundreds of nurses, I began my talk with the words, "My name is Brooklyn Hale, and a little over a year ago, my entire career's nearly destroyed by a lie." The room fell silent, and I told them everything, from Lydia's jealous obsession to the fake evidence she created, from the terror I felt in that disciplinary hearing to the moment Kendra revealed the truth. I talked about the importance of digital forensics in the modern age, about how technology can be used both to fabricate evidence and to uncover the truth. But most importantly, I talked about resilience. I told them that being falsely accused is one of the most traumatic experiences a professional can endure because it attacks your integrity and your identity. I shared the coping strategies that had helped me recover, the therapy, the support system, the decision to stay at my job rather than run away, the process of rebuilding trust in myself and others. And I emphasized that while we should all take reasonable precautions to protect ourselves, we shouldn't become paranoid or let fear prevent us from doing our jobs with compassion and professionalism. The response to my talk was overwhelming. Dozens of nurses approached me afterward to thank me for sharing my story, and several admitted they had experienced similar situations or knew colleagues who had. A few even shared that they were currently dealing with false accusations and asked for advice on how to defend themselves. I connected them with Kendra's digital forensics firm and with lawyers who specialized in employment law and defamation cases. It felt good to turn my painful experience into something that could help others. One nurse, a young woman named Jessica, who looked like she hadn't slept in days, pulled me aside after most of the crowd had dispersed. "Brooklyn, I can't thank you enough for what you shared today. I'm going through something similar right now. A patient's family member is claiming I stole jewelry from their room, and they've posted about it all over social media with my full name and photo. The hospital is investigating, and I'm terrified I'm going to lose my license, even though I didn't do anything wrong. After hearing your story, I feel like maybe there's hope that the truth will come out." I took both of her hands in mine and looked her directly in the eyes. "Jessica, here's what I learned from my experience. Document everything. Get security camera footage if it's available. Request digital forensics if there's any electronic evidence involved. Don't try to defend yourself on social media because anything you say can be twisted. Get a lawyer immediately, even if it costs money you don't have. because having legal representation shows you're taking this seriously and it protects your rights. And most importantly, don't let this shake your belief in your own integrity. You know you didn't steal anything, and if you hold on to that truth, it will eventually be proven. Jessica hugged me with tears in her eyes. Thank you. Thank you for fighting back and for sharing your story so others like me know we're not alone. We exchanged contact, information, and I followed up with her over the next several months. It turned out that the hospital's security footage clearly showed Jessica had never been alone in the patient's room, and the jewelry later turned up in the family member's car where they had apparently forgotten they had placed it. The family member never apologized for the false accusation, but Jessica's name was cleared and she kept her job. She later told me that remembering my story had given her strength during the investigation when she felt like giving up. As I reflect on everything that happened, I realize that Lydia's false accusation, as traumatic as it was, taught me profound lessons about truth, resilience, and the power of evidence. It showed me the importance of forensic experts like Kendra who can cut through lies and manipulation to reveal objective reality. It taught me that justice sometimes prevails, even when it seems impossible. And it reminded me that my identity and worth are not defined by what others say about me, but by who I actually am and the life I actually live. I also gained a deeper understanding of mental illness and how it can drive people to do terrible things they might never do if they were healthy. Lydia's jealousy wasn't a character flaw or a choice. It was a symptom of a psychiatric disorder that hijacked her perception of reality. That doesn't excuse her actions or mean she shouldn't face consequences, but it does mean I can hold two truths simultaneously. She hurt me terribly and needs to be held accountable, and she was also a sick person who needed help. Both things can be true. The restitution payments Lydia owed me arrived like clockwork every month, exactly on time, for the full 18 months of her probation. I used some of the money to pay off student loans and put the rest into savings. With each payment, I thought about how Lydia was working to make things right in the only way she could, through concrete action and financial accountability. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she had moved to a different state after her probation ended, started over in a new city where no one knew her story, and was continuing her psychiatric treatment. I wished her well from a distance, but maintained my boundary of no contact. Dr. Ethan and I continued working together for another 2 years before he accepted a position at a hospital in Portland and moved away. On his last day, he stopped by the nurses' station where I was charting and said, "Brooklyn, I know I've said this before, but I need to say it one more time. I'm so sorry for what Lydia put you through. You handled it with more grace than anyone could have expected, and I'm grateful that you never held her actions against me professionally. You're an exceptional nurse and an even better person." I smiled at him. "Ethan, you're a good doctor and a good man who got caught in an impossible situation. I never blamed you for your ex-wife's choices. I hope Portland treats you well, and I hope you find happiness." We shook hands and he walked away, closing that chapter of my life completely. 3 years after the incident, I was promoted to nurse manager of the internal medicine department, a position I had been working toward for years. My new responsibilities included overseeing staff scheduling, quality improvement initiatives, and serving as a liaison between the nursing staff and hospital administration. It was challenging work, but deeply fulfilling, and I threw myself into it with passion. One of my first initiatives as nurse manager was to develop a comprehensive training program on professional boundaries, digital privacy, and responding to false accusations. I worked with Kendra to create modules on digital forensics and cybersecurity for healthcare workers, teaching them how to protect their online presence and what to do if they became targets of harassment or defamation. The program became so successful that other hospitals in the Seattle area asked if they could adopt it for their own staff. During one of these training sessions, a nurse raised her hand and asked, "Brooklyn, how did you move past the anger? Even now, telling this story, don't you feel furious at what was done to you?" It was a fair question, one I had asked myself many times. I thought carefully before answering. Honestly, I was furious for a long time. I was angry at Lydia for targeting me, angry at the system for almost believing her lies, angry at myself for not seeing the threat coming. But eventually, I realized that holding on to that anger was only hurting me. It wasn't changing what had happened, and it wasn't making my life better. So I made a conscious choice to let go of the rage and focus instead on what I could control: my own healing, my career, my relationships, my future. I paused and looked around the room at the attentive faces. That doesn't mean I've forgotten what happened or that I wouldn't defend myself fiercely if it happened again. It just means I refuse to let Lydia's mental illness and bad choices define the rest of my life. She took enough from me during those months of accusation and investigation. I'm not giving her any more of my peace or my joy. The audience nodded thoughtfully, and I could see some of them making notes, taking to heart the lesson about choosing healing over bitterness. Kendra, who had joined me for this particular training session, added her own perspective. From a forensic standpoint, one thing Brooklyn's case taught me is that the truth always leaves traces if you know where to look for them. Lies require constant maintenance, and eventually they collapse under their own inconsistencies. But truth is stable and consistent because it's based on actual events that really happened. When I examined the evidence in Brooklyn's case, the lies revealed themselves quickly because they didn't align with objective data. The timestamps were wrong, the metadata was inconsistent, the patterns didn't make sense. Truth has an internal coherence that fabrications can never fully replicate. A young nurse in the back raised her hand. But what if you're accused of something and there is no digital evidence either way? What if it's just your word against someone else's and there's no forensic expert to prove the truth? I answered that question from hard-won experience. Then you rely on your documented history of professionalism, your reputation among colleagues, your consistent behavior patterns over time. Character witnesses matter. Employment records matter. The absence of any prior complaints or concerning behavior matters. And most importantly, you tell the truth clearly and consistently without embellishment or dramatization. Liars often trip themselves up by adding unnecessary details or changing their stories. Truth tellers can repeat the same account over and over because they're describing what actually happened. Kendra nodded in agreement. And if you're ever in that situation, document everything from that point forward. Keep detailed notes of every interaction, save all communications, and if possible, have witnesses present for any conversations related to the accusation. Create a paper trail that supports your version of events. It may feel paranoid in the moment, but if the situation escalates, you'll be grateful you have documentation. The training session ended with a role-playing exercise where nurses practiced responding to hypothetical accusations, learning how to stay calm, request evidence, invoke their rights to representation, and avoid saying anything that could be misinterpreted or used against them. It was sobering but empowering work, and I was proud that my painful experience was helping others prepare for situations they hopefully would never face. That evening, Kendra and I went out for dinner to celebrate another successful training session. Over pasta and wine, she told me about her latest case involving an executive being blackmailed with deep fake videos that appeared to show him engaged in illegal activities. She had been able to prove the videos were fabricated by analyzing frame rates, lighting inconsistencies, and unnatural eye movements, saving the executive's reputation and leading to the arrest of the blackmailers. It's amazing how much our work has evolved, Kendra mused. 10 years ago, people barely understood what metadata was. Now we're dealing with AI-generated content that can fool even trained observers. The technology for creating fake evidence is getting more sophisticated, but so are our methods for detecting it. It's an ongoing arms race between truth and deception. I swirled my wine thoughtfully. Do you think we're heading toward a world where nothing can be trusted? Where any video or audio recording could be fake and we can't believe our own eyes and ears? Kendra considered the question seriously. I think we're heading toward a world where verification becomes more important than ever. We'll need to rely more heavily on multiple sources of corroborating evidence, on blockchain authentication for important documents, on forensic analysis as a standard practice rather than a last resort. In some ways, it will make society more skeptical and paranoid, but in other ways, it will force us to develop better critical thinking skills and not blindly believe everything we see online. She leaned forward with intensity. But here's what I want people to understand from cases like yours. Brooklyn, technology is just a tool. It can be used for good or evil, to reveal truth or to obscure it. What matters is having ethical people who are committed to using these tools responsibly. You were saved not just by forensic technology, but by your own integrity and by the fact that enough people in positions of power cared about finding the truth rather than just taking the easy route of believing the first accusation. I raised my glass in a toast. To ethical people using powerful tools responsibly, to truth-tellers and truth-seekers, and to friendship forged in the fire of fighting for justice. Kendra clinked her glass against mine with a warm smile. I'll drink to that. As I drove home that night, I thought about how far I had come from that terrified woman sitting in a disciplinary hearing while her career hung in the balance. I had not only survived the false accusation, but had transformed it into purpose and advocacy. I had turned my victimization into a platform for helping others. And perhaps most importantly, I had proven to myself that I was stronger and more resilient than I had ever imagined. The final chapter of this story came unexpectedly about 4 years after the original incident. I received a letter forwarded to me through the hospital's legal department. It was from Lydia, postmarked from somewhere in Colorado. For a long moment, I stared at the envelope, debating whether to open it or simply throw it away unopened. Ultimately, my curiosity won out. The letter was handwritten on simple notebook paper, the words slightly shaky but legible. It began, "Dear Brooklyn, I don't expect you to read this, and I certainly don't expect you to respond, but my therapist suggested that writing to you might help me take fuller accountability for my actions, even if I never send it. I decided to send it anyway because you deserve to know how your story ended for me, even though I have no right to your attention or your time." The letter continued for several pages. Lydia described how after her probation ended, she had moved to Colorado to start fresh, where no one knew her story. She had continued intensive therapy and medication management for her psychiatric condition, which had been diagnosed as a combination of obsessive-compulsive disorder, delusional disorder, and severe anxiety. She had joined support groups for people with mental illness and had slowly built a life focused on healing and self-awareness, rather than on relationships and external validation. "I haven't dated anyone since the divorce," she wrote. "My therapist says I need to be healthy on my own before I can be healthy with someone else. And she's right. I spent so many years defining myself through Ethan, needing him to validate my worth, panicking every time I thought I might lose him, that I never developed a stable sense of who I was as an individual. The jealousy was a symptom of that emptiness inside me, that terror that without him I was nothing." She described getting a job as a medical billing specialist, work that kept her connected to healthcare, but removed from the high-stress environment that had triggered so much of her paranoia. She had adopted a rescue dog named Murphy, who had become her companion and emotional support animal. She volunteered at a women's shelter, helping other women who struggled with mental health issues and domestic violence. She had rebuilt her relationship with her estranged sister and was slowly learning to be a better aunt to her nieces. "I'm not writing to ask for your forgiveness," the letter continued. "I'm writing because you deserve to know that the person who hurt you so badly is working every single day to make sure she never hurts anyone like that again." I'm writing because you deserve to know that your strength in the face of my lies taught me what real integrity looks like. And I'm writing because even though you owe me nothing, I owe you the truth about what happened after you last saw me. The letter concluded with words that felt surprisingly genuine. Brooklyn, you are an extraordinary person who survived an attack that would have broken many others. You turned your pain into purpose and your trauma into advocacy. You showed me what grace looks like, not by forgiving me, but by refusing to let what I did destroy your spirit or your career. I will carry the shame of what I did to you for the rest of my life, but I'm learning to channel that shame into motivation to be better. Thank you for being strong enough to stand up for yourself when I tried to tear you down. Thank you for giving testimony that sent me toward help rather than just punishment. And thank you for existing in the world as an example of resilience and integrity. I wish you every happiness and success you deserve. Respectfully, Lydia. I read the letter 3 times, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. There was still hurt there, still anger at what she had put me through. But there was also something else. Relief, maybe, or validation that my choice to handle the situation with dignity rather than vengeance had rippled out in ways I couldn't have predicted. Lydia's healing was not my responsibility and not my victory, but knowing she was getting help and trying to become better felt like a form of cosmic justice more satisfying than any punishment could have been. I showed the letter to my therapist in our next session. "What do you want to do with this?" she asked gently. "Do you want to respond?" I thought about it carefully. No, I don't think I need to respond. The letter gave me closure, but responding would reopen a connection I've worked hard to close. I'm glad Lydia is getting help, and I genuinely hope she continues healing, but my healing requires maintaining boundaries. I can wish her well from a distance without inviting her back into my life in any capacity. My therapist nodded approvingly. "That's a very healthy boundary, Brooklyn. You can acknowledge her growth without taking responsibility for her healing journey. You can feel compassion for her struggle with mental illness without forgetting the harm she caused you. Both things can be true." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a file with all the other documentation from that period of my life, a file I kept not out of bitterness, but as a reminder of my own strength. A tangible record that I had faced injustice and prevailed. Today, 5 years after that terrible disciplinary hearing, I am thriving. I love my job as nurse manager and take pride in mentoring younger nurses and creating a department culture built on mutual respect and accountability. I'm in a healthy romantic relationship with a kind, stable person who knows my whole story and loves me, not in spite of it, but including it, recognizing that my experience made me stronger and more compassionate. I still meet with Kendra regularly, sometimes for work-related trainings, and sometimes just as friends catching up over coffee. I speak at conferences a few times a year, sharing my story with healthcare workers, legal professionals, and mental health advocates. Each time I tell it, I'm struck by how many people approach me afterward with their own stories of false accusations, cyberbullying, or reputation attacks. The epidemic of lies in our digital age is real and growing, but so is the community of survivors who refuse to be silenced or defeated by those lies. The hospital where I work has implemented comprehensive policies on handling accusations against staff members, requiring digital forensics review before any disciplinary action is taken based on electronic evidence. They've created a rapid response team that includes legal counsel, IT security, and mental health professionals who can evaluate accusations holistically rather than simply reacting to surface-level complaints. These changes came directly from the lessons learned in my case, proof that even terrible experiences can lead to positive systemic change. When I look back on that day when Lydia sat across from me in the disciplinary hearing, so certain she had destroyed me, I feel an almost surreal sense of gratitude mixed with the lingering trauma. Not gratitude for what she did, but gratitude for what I discovered about myself in the process of surviving it. I learned I was stronger than I knew, braver than I felt, and more resilient than I had ever been tested to prove. I learned that truth has power that lies can never match, no matter how elaborately constructed. I learned that there are people like Kendra in the world who dedicate their careers to uncovering truth and defending the innocent. I learned that institutions can choose justice over expediency when people of integrity lead them. And I learned that forgiveness is not something you owe anyone, but that you can still heal and move forward even without offering it. The irony is not lost on me that Lydia set out to destroy me and instead destroyed herself, losing her marriage, her freedom, her reputation, and years of her life to the consequences of her lies. Meanwhile, I, the intended victim, emerged stronger, more successful, and more purposeful than before. There's a certain poetry to that, a cosmic balancing of scales that feels like justice in its purest form. As I finish writing this account, sitting in my comfortable apartment with my cat purring beside me and my partner cooking dinner in the kitchen, I realize this is the happy ending Lydia tried to prevent. This peaceful, successful, fulfilling life is my victory. Not because I defeated her in some personal battle, but because I refused to let her defeat me. I refused to become bitter or paranoid or broken. I chose healing over hatred, truth over revenge, and resilience over retreat. To anyone reading this who has been falsely accused or targeted by lies, I want you to know that survival is possible, justice is possible, and thriving is possible. Document everything. Seek expert help. Tell your truth clearly and consistently, and trust that fabrications eventually crumble under the weight of reality. It may take time, it may be painful, and it may feel impossible in the darkest moments, but truth has a way of emerging when you fight for it with integrity and persistence. And to those who might be tempted to fabricate accusations against others, understand that in our digital age, lies leave fingerprints. Technology creates evidence trails that experts like Kendra can follow back to their source. You may think you've created the perfect deception, but metadata doesn't lie. IP addresses don't lie, and forensic analysis doesn't care about your narrative. The truth will find you, and when it does, the consequences will be far worse than whatever you feared in the first place. My name is Brooklyn Hale. I am a nurse, a manager, a survivor, and a warrior for truth. 5 years ago, a jealous woman tried to destroy my life with an elaborate web of lies. 1 hour later, in a disciplinary hearing that was supposed to end my career, digital forensics expert Kendra dismantled every false accusation with undeniable evidence, and the accuser's face went pale as her own lies consumed her instead of me. This is my story. This is my truth. This is my victory. And this is my message to anyone fighting their own battle against false accusations. Hold on to your integrity. Trust in the power of truth, seek expert help, and never give up. Justice may not come quickly, but when it comes backed by evidence and delivered by people of principle, it is absolute and it is beautiful. The woman who tried to destroy me is now rebuilding her life in another state, hopefully healthier and wiser. The expert who saved me has become one of my closest friends and continues saving others with her skills. The institution that almost failed me learned from its mistakes and changed its policies to protect future staff members. And I, the intended victim, stand here stronger, happier, and more purposeful than ever before. That is how this story ends. Not with vengeance, not with tragedy, but with truth, triumphant, and a life reclaimed. The doctor's jealous wife thought she walked into that disciplinary hearing holding my termination papers. She was wrong. What she actually walked into was the moment when her lies met someone smarter than her deception, when her paranoia met objective evidence, and when her attempt to destroy an innocent person instead led to her own unraveling. 1 hour changed everything. One expert changed my fate. One commitment to truth changed the trajectory of multiple lives. And now, 5 years later, I can say with absolute certainty that truth wins, resilience matters, and no lie, no matter how elaborate, can permanently defeat someone who refuses to be broken. This is Brooklyn Hale's story, and this is how justice is served in the digital age,